My name is Charlotte, and this is not just a story about money or property. This is the story of how my own parents looked me in the eye and tried to hand over the home I had built. The home I had poured my sweat and heart into, to my sister. It's about betrayal that came not from strangers, but from the people who raised me. And it's about the strength I never knew I had until I was pushed into a corner, forced to stand my ground, even when everyone pointed their finger at me and called me cruel. I grew up believing family was everything. My parents worked hard, my sister was the golden child, and I learned very early that in our house, I had to fight for attention, for praise, for approval. It always seemed like my sister could do no wrong. If she brought home a bad grade, my parents brushed it off with a laugh. If I brought home the same grade, they'd look at me like I was a disappointment. I told myself as a teenager that one day, I'd prove them wrong. One day I'd build something of my own so undeniable, so beautiful, that even they couldn't ignore it. That day came when I bought my lakefront mansion. It wasn't just any house. It was a dream, a $1.5 million home with wide windows looking out over the water, a long deck where the sunrise painted gold across the surface, and rooms filled with light and silence and peace. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had created a space where I truly belonged. I furnished it myself. I chose every color, every texture, every tiny detail. This wasn't just a mansion. It was me. But my family never saw it that way. The first time my parents visited, instead of telling me they were proud, instead of saying you've made it, Charlotte, they started joking. Wow, Charlotte, maybe we should move in here instead of paying rent. My sister laughed and added, you probably don't even need all this space. You could give me the upstairs. They said it with a smile. But there was something in their eyes. Something that told me it wasn't just a joke. Over time, the comments got sharper, less playful. Every family dinner, every gathering, there was a new remark. Your sister's apartment is so small. She deserves better. This house is too much for one person. Family should share. Charlotte, don't be so selfish. And every time I heard those words, a little part of me broke. Because I wanted to believe they loved me for me. But it became clearer with every passing month. They didn't see me. They saw what I had. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon, when they showed up at my mansion unannounced. My sister was with them, standing tall and smug like she already owned the place. My parents sat me down at my own dining table and said, the words that would change everything. Charlotte, we've decided your sister should move in here. She needs this space. She's starting a family. And you don't need a house this big all by yourself. We've already told her she can have the upstairs floor. It's settled. I remember the way the world tilted in that moment. My breath caught in my chest. My own parents had already promised my $1.5 million. Lakefront mansion, my home, to my sister, without even asking me, without even considering that maybe I had a say in it. My sister sat there smiling, nodding, like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I finally found my voice, it wasn't calm. It wasn't polite. It was raw, shaking, breaking. No, absolutely not. This is my house. I bought it. I built it. You don't get to give it away like it's yours to hand over. The silence that followed was heavy, sharp. Then my mother's face hardened. Charlotte, don't be cruel. She's your sister. Family shares. Cruel, that word cut deeper than all the others. Cruel, as if standing up for myself. As if protecting the one thing in this world I had worked so hard for made me a monster. My father shook his head in disappointment. My sister rolled her eyes. And I felt in that moment like I was the villain in their story. But I also knew something else. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me this time. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring out at the water. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. And for the first time, I questioned everything. Was I really cruel? Was I selfish for saying no? Or was I finally seeing the truth that my parents never saw me as their daughter, just as a resource for their favorite child? I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt something else rising inside me. Something stronger. A quiet rage, a steady fire. I promised myself in that moment that I would not bend. I would not give in, no matter how much guilt they tried to put on me. Because if I gave up my home, my peace, my life's work, what would I have left?
Nothing.
The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages. My mother texting me paragraphs about how selfish I was, how heartless. My father calling me, his voice cold, saying things like, "You'll regret treating family this way." My sister posting online about how some people don't know how to share. Blessings. I was painted as the villain to everyone who would listen. But I kept silent. I didn't respond. Because deep down, I knew the truth didn't need defending. What was mine, and no amount of manipulation could change that. Still, the loneliness was unbearable. Nights felt endless, and mornings felt heavy. I woke up in that big mansion, and for the first time, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a battlefield. And yet, I wasn't ready to surrender. The more I thought about it, the clearer things became. My parents weren't asking me to share. They were demanding, expecting, assuming that what I worked for belonged to them, belonged to my sister, as if my life and my hard work were just extensions of theirs. I couldn't sleep at night. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, hearing my mother's voice in my head saying I was cruel. I wondered how they could twist love into something that ugly. One morning, I went down to the kitchen, made myself coffee, and sat at the table where they had confronted me. I ran my hand across the polished wood and whispered to myself, "This is mine. This is my life." And in that moment, I knew I had to do more than just say no. I had to show them that their control over me was over. The first step was distance. I stopped answering their calls. I stopped reading the messages. I muted their group chat, even though the silence it created in my life was deafening. My parents had always been loud presences, filling every corner with their expectations, their judgments, their demands. Cutting them off felt like cutting off oxygen. But I needed space to think, to breathe, to remember who I was outside of their voices. My sister, though, she didn't back off so easily. She started showing up at my house unannounced. At first she would knock sweetly, pretending to be casual. "Oh, I was just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd drop by." Then she would wander through the rooms like she was measuring them, imagining where her things would go. One day she even brought fabric samples, holding them against the curtains in the guest room and saying, "This would look so much better once they move in." I stood there stunned. My own sister was planning her life inside my home as if I had already surrendered it. I told her, "You need to leave," she pouted, crossed her arms and said, "You don't have to be dramatic, Charlotte. Mom and Dad already agreed. You're just dragging this out." Those words burned. Mom and Dad already agreed, as if my ownership, my hard work, my sacrifice meant nothing compared to their approval. I shut the door behind her that day, my heart pounding in my ears, and I swore I wouldn't let her set foot inside again. But the war had only just begun. At family gatherings, the tension was unbearable. I walked into a cousin's birthday party and every pair of eyes turned toward me. I heard the whispers. "That's the one who wouldn't let her sister have the house. Can you believe how selfish she is?" People I'd grown up with, people who knew me since childhood, now looked at me as though I was a stranger. My sister sat across the room, her hand resting dramatically on her stomach, hinting about the baby she might have soon. And every sympathetic glance from relatives fell on her. I was painted as the villain, the cold-hearted sister who chose stone walls over blood. I tried to defend myself once. I tried to explain that I bought the mansion with my own money, that I had sacrificed years of my life, that no one handed it to me. But my words fell flat. People didn't want to hear my truth. They wanted the simpler story. Charlotte had more. Her sister had less, so Charlotte should give. I left that party early, tears stinging my eyes. Driving back to my lakefront mansion, I felt like the loneliest person in the world. I parked outside, stared at the glittering reflection of the water, and wondered why I was always the one left out, always the one unloved. And then something shifted inside me. Maybe I couldn't change their perception. Maybe I couldn't make them love me the way they loved her. But I could reclaim my narrative. I could take back the power they tried to strip from me. If they wanted to call me cruel, fine. If they wanted to make me the villain, fine. I would show them what it looked like when the villain finally stopped bowing down. I began to take small steps. I spoke less, but when I did speak, my words were firm, unshakable. When my parents came to visit without warning, I didn't open the door. When my sister called demanding keys to her future home, I blocked her number. When relatives asked me why I was being so cold, I smiled and said, "'Cause I finally learned how to protect myself." For the first time in my life, I didn't try to win their approval. I didn't try to soften myself to be loved. And that drove them mad. My parents showed up again one evening, banging on my door. I opened it just a crack and my mother's face was red with anger. "Charlotte, you're breaking this family apart. Do you understand what you're doing?" I looked her in the eye, steady and calm, and said, "No. Mom, you broke this family the moment you tried to give away my life's work. You broke it when you decided my sister's comfort mattered more than my dignity." Then I closed the door. Behind the door I heard her gasp. My father muttered something about me being ungrateful. My sister shouted through the wood that I would regret this. Their footsteps echoed down the porch as they stormed away. And yet, instead of feeling broken, I felt lighter than I had in months. Still, the battle wasn't over. They began spreading rumors beyond the family. My parents told neighbors I was abandoning them. They told old family friends I had become greedy, cold, materialistic. My sister played the victim online, posting teary-eyed photos about being rejected by family, while comments poured in about how unfair life was to her. Everywhere I turned, it felt like I was surrounded by their version of the story, their lies. But I had something they didn't. I had the truth. And I had receipts. For years I had kept records. Bank statements, contracts. Proof that I alone had bought and maintained the mansion. Emails where my parents admitted they couldn't contribute. Messages where my sister asked me for money. At first I had saved them for my own sanity, to remind myself I wasn't crazy. But now I realized these were my shield, my proof, my revenge. I didn't post them online. I didn't want to stoop to their level of public shaming. But when people confronted me, when distant relatives messaged me saying, "How could you be so cruel?" I calmly sent them the documents. I showed them the truth, that my parents had tried to take what wasn't theirs. That my sister wasn't a victim but a manipulator. One by one, the whispers started to change. One by one, people began to see. The shift wasn't instant, but it was powerful. A cousin who had called me selfish apologized. An aunt who had ignored me reached out with kindness. Even neighbors who once looked at me with pity now nodded in quiet respect. My parents and my sister could spin lies all they wanted, but the truth was stronger. And for once, I was the one holding it. Still deep down, I wished it hadn't come to this. I wished my parents could have seen me, just once, for who I really was. But maybe some battles can't be won. Maybe some wounds never heal. What I did know was this: they would never take my mansion. They would never take my peace. And they would never again make me feel small in my own life. I began to rebuild my sense of home. I redecorated the mansion not for anyone else, but for me. I planted flowers by the water. I painted the walls in colors that made me happy. I filled the rooms with laughter from friends who truly cared about me, not just what I had. Slowly, the house became mine again, not just in name but in spirit. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Weeks passed, and slowly the storm began to settle. My parents' anger didn't fade, but their influence outside our home started to weaken. People who had once whispered in my ear, questioning my decisions, now began to see the truth. Some approached me quietly, apologizing for doubting me, for believing the story my family had tried to sell. I didn't celebrate. I simply nodded and kept moving forward. My mansion was still mine. My life still intact, and for the first time, no one's judgment could shake me. One afternoon, my sister showed up again, brazen and confident, expecting to force her way in. She rang the bell with that same smile I had grown to hate, like she already owned the house. I answered the door calmly, my back straight, my voice steady. "I told you before, you are not welcome here." She scoffed. "Charlotte," Mom and Dad said. "They can say whatever they want," I interrupted. "This is my home and I will not allow you to take it. I will not let anyone make me feel small again. This ends now." For a moment I saw something crack in her. The smugness faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. I realized then that standing my ground wasn't just about protecting. My house, it was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my identity. After that day, visits stopped. Calls slowed. The manipulation lost its grip. My parents eventually came to understand, though reluctantly, that I would not bend. They tried one last time to guilt me, but my resolve was unshakable. I refused to argue, refused to justify, refused to surrender. And slowly, they began to respect that boundary, not because they admitted I was right, but because they realized I would not be moved. In the quiet of my lakefront mansion, I began to reflect on what had happened. The betrayal had cut deep, yes. The judgment of my family had stung sharply. But through it all, I discovered something far more important than any house or material possession. I discovered my own strength. I discovered that standing up for myself, even when everyone else called me cruel, was an act of courage, not selfishness. I started sharing my story, not to shame my family, but to help others who might be facing similar betrayals. I talked about boundaries, about self-respect, about the importance of protecting your own peace. And the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers who had been through the same, who had been labeled cruel, selfish, or heartless for refusing to surrender what was theirs. They thanked me for showing them that saying no didn't make them bad, it made them strong. Even my sister eventually reached out months later in a quiet message. She didn't apologize, but she admitted she had pushed too far and that she now understood my decision. That was enough for me. Forgiveness, when it comes, is not always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A simple acknowledgement that the other person has finally seen the truth. My parents too changed, though slowly and imperfectly. I could see glimmers of understanding in their eyes. They weren't perfect, they never would, but they had learned a lesson too. That children, even adult children, deserve respect, autonomy, and the right to protect what is theirs. The mansion, once a battleground, became a sanctuary. I filled it with laughter against friends who valued me, family members who respected me, and moments of peace I had nearly forgotten. Every corner of the house reminded me of my journey from betrayal to empowerment, from isolation to freedom. The house was no longer just a property. It was a symbol of my resilience, my courage, and my refusal to be diminished. Looking back, I realize now that the real victory wasn't in keeping the house, though that was important. The victory was in reclaiming my story, my dignity, and my voice. It was in showing myself and everyone else that no one can define your worth or take what is rightfully yours without consequence. That is the lesson I carry with me every day. Courage isn't loud. Courage is quiet, steady, and unwavering. It's the voice that says no when the world demands yes. It's the hand that holds firm when others try to push you over. It's the heart that believes in itself, even when everyone else doubts. And so, my story ends not with revenge in the traditional sense, but with justice of the heart. My parents learned the limits of control. My sister learned the importance of respect. And I learned, more than anything, that protecting yourself is not cruelty, it is love. Self-love, boundary setting, and courage are the true measures of strength. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this: never let anyone, family, or otherwise make you feel small for standing up for yourself. You have the right to protect your life, your home, your peace, and your dignity. Sometimes the people who love you the most or claim to will challenge that. Sometimes they will accuse you of being cruel, selfish, or heartless. But remember, saying no does not make you wrong. It makes you human, strong, and alive. Today, I sit in my lakefront mansion, looking out over the water, sunlight glinting off the ripples, and I smile. Not because I won a house, but because I won myself. I am Charlotte. I am seen. I am heard. I am enough. And nothing, not even the people who tried to take everything from me, can change that. So to anyone listening to this story, hold tight to what is yours, your voice, your life, your dignity. Protect it fiercely. Love yourself boldly. And never, ever let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself makes you cruel. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say, no, this is mine, and I will not give it away.